Okay, so in this session, we will discuss whatever last class we have discussed the annotations. Yes, no. So what last class we have discussed the annotations. Last class we have discussed how to represent stereotype annotations. So we are discussing more about stereotype annotations. So how to represent Java class? How to represent Java class as string B. Yeah, how to represent Java class as a string B. So how we can represent Java class as a string B? The class, the Java class which is managed by which is managed by IOC container. IOC container is called as string B. That Java class is called as a string B. The Java class which is managed by IOC container is called string B. To represent Java class as a string bean, we have following annotations. We have following annotations. What annotations? First of all, at the rate component annotation. At the rate component annotation. Next, at the rate service annotation. Next, at the rate repository annotation. Repository annotation. At the rate configuration annotation. Configuration annotation. At the rate configurations. Yes. Configuration annotation. Next, at the rate bean annotation. Yeah. Bean annotation. At the rate controller annotation. Controller annotation. And next we have at the rate rest controller annotation. So these are following annotations that can be used to represent Java class as a string bean class. So we can represent Java class as a string bean by using following these annotations. Okay, so these are annotations that we are using at a class level. Yeah. These are annotation at the rate component, at the rate service, at the rate repository, at the rate configuration, and at the rate controller, and at the rate rest controller. These are annotations that we are using at a class level. But we have one more annotation at the rate bean annotation. These annotations we can use at a method level. Okay, at the rate component, at the rate service, at the rate repository, at the rate configuration, at the rate controller, and at the rate rest controller. These are annotation we are using at a class level. But at the rate bean annotations, we are using at a method level. So this annotation can be used at a method level. So we can say at the rate bean annotation can be used at method level. Which level? Method level. Okay, let's try to use how we can use at the rate bean annotation at class level. Okay, so sorry, at the rate bean annotation we can use at a method level. Okay, let's now where we are using. Now coming to the Spring Boot application. So here we have application, Spring Boot application. Last time we have created our application, Spring Boot. Okay, so this is the application. Okay, so last time we have created a Spring Boot app. So now expand this project. Okay, got it. Now you can check here. Here we have form.example.demo. Okay, let's inside this class. Sorry, inside this package we have several classes. Car class, just like you can check here. Car class is also service class because this class annotated at the rate service annotation. So it means this class is represented as a string bean. Now we have created one more class. Let's now here we create one more class. I'm created one class. I give the class name app config class. What is the class name? App config. Now this is the class app config. Spring container, IOC container will not create the instance for that class. Yes, Spring container will create the instance for that class if this class represented as a Spring Bean. So we can represent this class as a Spring Bean. So here we are using one annotation at the rate configuration annotation. So at the rate configuration annotation. So what is that annotation? Tells the roles of the class. This class contains configuration related information. Yes, no? So stereotype annotation that already we have discussed with you. Stereotype annotation just tell the role of the class. If any class which is annotated at the rate configuration annotation, it means this annotation tell the role for the class. This class contains configurations information. Yes or no? So I'm annotating this class by using at the rate configuration annotation. Now we define a constructor here for app config class. Here we define a constructor. Now we define a constructor. Okay, system.out.println. Now I'm writing some statement. App config, yes, no, colon, 1 minute. App config double colon constructor. App config double colon constructor. Now inside this config class, let's one point. Let's here we create one more class. Let's here we create one more class. I give the class name is just like motor. I create one class, motor class. Inside this class, I declare three property A, B, C. Yeah, I declare three property A, B, C. Now we define a constructor for this class, public motor constructor, which takes three parameters, int A, comma int B, comma int C. Okay. So this dot A equal A, this dot B this dot C okay, what is the constructor name? Motor. Now here we write the statement also.
ना जाने रही तू है जाने रही चाहता था है
Okay, now here it is the system.out.println. This is the motor class constructor. Motor constructor. Now we are not annotating this class by using any stereotype annotations. Now container will not create the instance for this class. Yes, no. Suppose my requirement here we have app config class. Inside app config class, we want to create the instance for motor class. Yes, now here we want to define the logic for creating the instance for the motor class. Okay, so inside this class, I'm defining one method. Suppose I give the method name is a create instance. Okay, I give the method name is a create instance. I'm giving the method name create instance method. So now this method what returns? This method returns which type of object? Motor type object. Method return type is a motor. Okay. Now return type motor. Now here we create one motor object inside this method. Motor equal to new motor. And now this motor actually requires three different parameters. Okay, let's now we are passing three different parameters. So here we create the motor object. So let's now suppose we want to create motor object based on some custom logic. Yes, no? Suppose my requirement, yes, no? Based on custom requirement, we want to set some features, some properties, then we have required to create. So if you have custom requirement, yes, no, suppose you want to create instance for any class based on any custom requirement, then actually what we need to do, then we need to define one configuration class. Inside that configuration class, we need to define a method where we need to write the logic for creating the custom class object. Yes, no. So here my requirement, we want to create motor object where we want to pass three different values. Sometimes suppose I want to set two value. Yes, no. So whatever your custom logic, whatever your requirement. So here we define one method which return create which returns motor object. Yes, no. First we create the motor class object here, and we are setting the properties whatever we have required. Yes, no. And then we finally we return this motor object. Now this method was returned motor object. Now this method what contains, actually this method contains the configuration for creating the motor instance. Yes, we can say this method contains the logic for creating the motor instance. So now container how can detect automatic? Yes, this method will return the instance which instance? Motor instance. So container how needs to identify automatic? So for that, now this method needs to be annotated at the rate bean annotations. So now what's here? Bean annotation. Bean annotation what indicates? It indicating that method produce a bean to manage by the Spring container. If any method which is annotated by at the rate bean annotations, remember this point. If any method which is annotated by at the rate bean annotations, it means that bean managed by the Spring container. If any method, yes, no, which is annotated by at the rate bean annotation, it means that method produce one bean. That method will create one instance. That bean will manage by the Spring container. Okay, now whatever bean this method returns, who will manage? Container will manage. Okay, if you are not annotating this method at the rate bean annotation, now container will create the instance for the motor? No, container will not create. Container won't be create the instance for the motor. But if you want this motor instance, yes, no, whatever logic we have mentioned here inside the create instance method, that bean will manage by the Spring container. So now we require to configure this method at the rate bean annotation. So bean annotation is a method level annotation. You can check here. Bean annotation is a method level annotation. Which level annotation? Method level annotations. So bean annotation we can say which type annotations? Bean annotation we can say at a method level annotation. So any method which is annotated at the rate bean annotations, it means that bean will produce a bean which managed by the Spring container. So whenever container scan the project, this is a configuration class. Inside the configuration class, we have one method that which return the bean, yes, no, which return the instance of motor. That instance will required to manage by the container. So now you can check here. We are not calling this method, yes, no, anywhere. Now come into the main class here. You can check here. Now I just run this application. Run on Spring Boot application. Okay, you can check here. You can check here. Motor object is created, yes, you can check here. Motor object is created. Who will create? Now this motor object is created. You can check here. Motor object is created. Who will create the instance for the motor? Motor instance will be created by the container. Who will manage? Container, yes, no? Okay, let's watch here. Save it. And now come into the app config class. Let's now, if you're not annotating this method at the rate bean annotation, then this bean will be managed by the, okay, 1 minute. Again, save it. This will managed by the container. Okay, you can check here. Okay, stop it. Again, run it, and then you can identify. Okay, now run it. Run as the Spring Boot application. Okay, now select the main class, right click, run as Spring Boot application. Okay, you can check here. You can check here. Motor object is not created, yes, no? Then motor object is not created, yes, no? It means this will be not managed by the container, yes, no? So now my requirement, we want who will manage this motor instance? I want the Spring container needs to be managed this motor instance. So what we need to do? So now with this method need to be annotated at the rate bin annotation. Once we annotate this method by using at the rate bin annotation, it means this bin will be managed by the Spring container. Okay, save it, run it, you can check here. You can check here, motor object is created, yes, now motor object is created. So this is the auto configuration we can say. Actually, Spring Boot has feature one auto configuration. Watch here. Spring Boot automatic detects, yes, no? And now this bin, this motor instance needs to be managed by the Spring container, yes, no? Once you annotate at the rate bin annotation, yes, no? So now whatever bin written by this method, that bin will be managed by the container. So here you can define a configuration class. If you have any configuration under that configuration class, yes, no, you can define our configuration. Okay, now coming to the main class. This is a start class, yes, no? Okay. So now watch here. This is a start class. Now this start class will be annotated by which annotations? At the rate Spring Boot annotations. Okay. So at the rate boot Spring Boot annotation. Let's try to understand what is the at the rate Spring Boot annotation also. Okay. At the rate Spring Boot applications, yeah, applications, annotations, yes, no, will be available in start class. Okay. Where is the at the rate Spring Boot application annotation will be available? At the start class. In which class? In start class of Spring Boot at class level. Yeah. So at the rate Spring Boot application annotation will be available in start class. Yes, no, of Spring Boot. Yes, no, at class level. So this annotation is nothing we can say. Actually, this is one annotation. Okay, this is a one annotation is equal to three annotation. Actually, Spring at the rate Spring Boot application annotation is the combination of three annotations. Spring Boot application annotation is the configuration. It is the con. Sorry, Spring Boot application annotation is the combination of three annotation. One is the Spring Boot configuration. Spring Boot configuration. Yes, no. Spring Boot configuration. Second, what is the at the rate enable auto configuration. Enable auto configuration. Third one is a component scan. At the rate component scan. At the rate Spring Boot application is the combination of three annotations. This single annotation is a combination of three annotations. At the rate Spring Boot configuration, at the rate enable auto configuration, at the rate component scan. So you can use three different annotation at a different level. Suppose you require auto configuration, yes, no? So you require to use which annotation? At the rate Spring Boot, at the rate enable auto configuration. Suppose you require component scanning. Automatic component needs to be scanned, yes, no? So whenever container start, container needs to be scan all the components, whatever components available in your project, yes, no? You have required at the rate component scanning, yes, no? at the rate Spring Boot configuration annotation. So suppose you require Spring Boot related any configuration, yes or no? You need to annotate the class which annotation by which annotation at the rate Spring Boot configuration. Now using all this annotation in place of all three annotation, we can use single one annotation at the rate Spring Boot applications annotation. Okay, so remember this point. Spring Boot application annotation will be available in which class? In start class of Spring Boot at a class level, which is the combination of three annotations. So now you have not required to specify separate this annotation. If you use only Spring Boot application annotation, it is also combination of all these three annotations. It means once you annotate the class at the rate Spring Boot application annotation, it means the class automatic take configuration, yes, Spring Boot configuration also. Now it will enable the auto configuration also, and it will enable the component scanning also. Clear my point? What is the component scanning? Okay, so what is the component scanning? Component scanning, if you talk about the component scanning means it is the process to identify the Spring Bean classes available in our applications. Okay, let's here we are using at the rate component scan annotation also, yes, no? So at the rate component scan, what enables component scanning? Let's understand what means of component scan. Component scan. Okay, so component scanning means it is the process, yes, no? It is the process of identifying Spring Bean classes, yes, available in our application, yes, no? So component scanning means it is a process of identifying Spring Bean classes available in our application. So container will identify, yes, no, whatever Spring Bean classes available in your application. Whatever it will automatic, yes, no. So component scanning, we can say just it is the process to identify Spring Bean classes that available in our applications. Component scan is a built-in functionality in Spring Boot, yes, no? So we can say component scanning is built-in, yes, no? Built-in functionality in Spring Boot, yeah? It is a built-in functionality in Spring Boot. Okay, component scanning start from which package actually we can say? Okay, component scanning will start from base package. What is the base package? Which package is known as base package? The base package means the package, yes, no? The package. Which package is known as base package? Base package means the package which contains boot start class. The package which contains the boot start class is called as base package. As a base package. Which class called as a base package? The package which contains boot start class